So welcome to Miss Reche YouTube channel once again. And in this video, you're going to tell us your journey from America to living in African villages.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes.
I'm ready.
So to start with the lady, of course, tell us your name, where you were born, and where you are now.
My name is Stephanie. I was born in Texas, and now I live in Bungoma, Kenya.
And I'm Jeff. I was also born in Texas and now live here in Bungoma, Kenya.
Okay. Tell us when and how you moved to Kenya.
Okay. It started many years ago.
When was that?
I would say about 12 years ago now. So about 5 years before we moved here, I began just to have an unexplainable desire for Africa. At the time, I was a bivocational pastor. I was working full-time in restaurants as a supervisor, and also as I was part-time as an associate or assistant pastor in a church, and also working with the youth group and things like that. And just the more I studied the Word of God and heard God more through His Word and talked to God more through prayer, I just began to more and more have an interest in Africa. I really couldn't explain it. I had never been to Africa at the time, had never been on any mission trips, but really just had that desire. And so I started to study more about missions, started reading some of the biographies of some of the great missionaries in the history of the church, and just really felt like I wanted to do something along those lines. I didn't really know what that would look like, but wanted to do something along those lines. So I began to talk to my wife Stephanie about it, told her of my ideas about wanting to go to Africa, and it was not really well received at first.
You come to her reaction when you told her that.
Yes. And so it became even a point of tension in our marriage, because I wanted to be able to talk to her about this. I wanted to be able to consider the possibility of us even one day moving our family to Africa. And I wanted to explore those possibilities, and she really wanted nothing to do with it. And so it did end up leading to some tension, some arguments, and it got to the point where I just had to stop talking to her about it, because it was just causing too many problems. But still, that feeling in me continued to grow. It would not go away. And so my prayer for a good 2 years was just that God would either take that desire away from me, or that He would show my wife that this was what we were supposed to do. I finally got an opportunity to volunteer with a missions organization that a friend of mine through our previous church had started. And I started volunteering, just helping him keep in contact with indigenous pastors that were being supported through the mission organization, and helping send money to support some of the projects that were going on in various countries. And finally, I was able to take a short-term mission trip with that man, David Shelton, and came here to Kenya.
When was that?
On that trip. That was early 2016, April of 2016.
April. Yeah.
And so we came to visit some of the pastors who were being supported and see what they were doing. And it was on that trip that I really just fell in love with Kenya. I fell in love with the people here. I loved the environment. I loved the landscape. Just everything about Kenya. I loved it.
Where were the pastor based?
There was one here in Bungoma. There was one in Moisbridge. So those were the two main areas that I saw. And it was just a very short trip, about 10 days. And when I returned home...
before returning
home...
home...
sorry.
It's okay. What impressed you and what shocked you at the same time, seeing Kenya for the first time?
Yeah, so what impressed me was the people were very welcoming. You know, you would go and visit someone in their home and they would just welcome you there. They would want you to come in. They would want you to talk. They wanted to hear your story. They wanted to share their stories. That was not something I experienced very much in America. In America, everyone kind of keeps it to themselves. They're very busy. You could live in a neighborhood for 10 years and never meet your neighbors. That's just the way Americans can be. So that really impressed me, upon me, just the sense of community that was here in Kenya. One thing that shocked me really was to see the extreme poverty that some people live in. You know, I had seen things on TV, or I had heard things about poverty. Even I had seen poverty in America, but the poverty that I saw here in Kenya was much different. And so, yeah, that was something that shocked me, to find people living in, you know, a mud hut, a mud house, or you know, even with grass roof, a lot of them, having to go to a river every day to fetch their water, and not having electricity, those sort of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now landing to Kenya for the first time. Take us the journey from the city to the village. How was it?
Oh my goodness, it's like a different world. Even today, you know, after all these years we've been here, I still think of Nairobi as a completely different world than the village. You know, Nairobi has everything that a major city in America has. It is all just there. And so, you know, it wasn't a big transition landing in Nairobi, coming from America, but now traveling from Nairobi 8 or 9 or 10 hours on a matatu to come to Bungoma, and then arriving here in Bungoma and just seeing a much different place. It's hard to imagine that Nairobi is in the same country.
Yeah.
The weather, how was it for you?
The weather was actually fine, because I was born and raised in Texas, and so even the heat that we have in Texas is worse than the heat. The humidity that we have in Texas is worse than the humidity in Kenya. So I think a lot of Kenyans are surprised to hear me say that the climate here is nicer. It is easier to deal with than the climate in Texas. But I mean, a main difference would be in Texas, everywhere you go there's air conditioning. So even though it's hot outside, you can just go inside and cool off. But in, you know, living on the equator here in Kenya, most people do not have air conditioning, of course, and so it's hard to escape the heat.
After visiting here for 10 days, now you're going back to America. How did you convince your wife now that you want to move here?
That was the beautiful part. It was not me who convinced her, it was God.
And also, Stefan, to tell us how you broke the news.
Well, actually, so when he was able to go, he had actually tried to go the year before. He tried to come to Kenya maybe 2 years before, and it just didn't work out. And so when it was finally able to, like, everything to work out, he got the time off work, all that stuff, I was excited. I was like, I'm glad he's going. He's going to get this out of his system. Then we can quit hearing about Kenya and Africa, and we can just move on. And while he was gone, it hit me, he's going to want to move when he gets home. And so I really started praying about that because I knew it was something that he really wanted. It was something I was scared to death to do. I thought it was crazy. Nobody moves there with 7 kids. Like, okay, if you're going to be a missionary, but you don't have 7 kids and, do that. And then not only that, but we were going to have to leave our oldest 3 boys behind. That felt really bad to me. So I was just like, no, but I knew he was going to want to move. So I started praying about it. And I really got the feeling that that's what we were supposed to do. We were supposed to move. And so I'd kind of talked to the kids about it. I was like, you guys know he's going to want to move when he gets back. And they were like, yeah, I think we should. And I was like, our kids are very adventurous. He's very adventurous. I like things.
All of them?
Yeah, pretty much all of them. I like to know things. Like, I'm not really one to travel because I don't know those places. I don't really need to know those places. What I know is fine. So I had never been here before we moved. We didn't make another trip back. So when he got home, I think it was like his second day home, I said, so what'd you think? Was it better? Was it worse? What'd you think? And he's like, it was better than I expected. Wow. And I was like, are you ready to move? And he said, yes. And I said, okay. So that was in April, at the end of April 2016, and then we moved here the end of November 2016.
Oh, it didn't.
Yeah, we didn't waste time. It was one of those, like, we knew that's what God wanted us to do, and the more that we took steps to make it happen, the more things fell into place, and so we were like, let's just go. If we know we're supposed to go, let's just go.
So where were you coming as a family now?
We, as I mentioned, I was volunteering with a missions organization that at the time it was called AFM Ministry. We're still with that same organization, though the name has kind of evolved. It's now Mercy Ministries AFM Africa. And so at the time, the ministry was already supporting indigenous pastors here in Western Kenya. And so our thought was to move close to one of them that's here in Bungoma, that we would kind of work side by side with him. He was a bishop over some churches, and I thought, as a pastor, I would work doing some Bible training with some of the people in the churches, and we knew that we wanted to be involved with children, and so we wanted to start a children's home. We had been talking to some of those pastors about the needs in this particular area for a children's home, and we also had a school here in this particular village, a village known as Kaya, so we're about 20 minutes drive outside of Bungoma town. And we had a school that we were supporting, the ministry was, and so to us it made sense that we would find land near the school so that the children's home would be right there by the school, so the children that are living in the home could attend that school that we were already supporting. And we just had all these great ideas that this was going to work so great. Yeah, so I don't know if you want me to continue from there,
Let me go back to Stephanie.
Yeah.
You're coming to Kenya now as a family. Tell us briefly, how was planning, like jobs, you were working, family, friends, how you...
So Jeff needed to work until the last month before we moved here, so he just waited until it was closer and then told his boss, gave him a 2-week notice and said, I'm moving. I think a lot of people thought we were crazy. I mean, we've even had some people come back and say, I really thought you guys were crazy and that it wasn't going to work, but it's worked, and so that's good. So we just kind of handled it that way. We told friends and family first, and then we started selling all of our belongings, and we had vehicles that we had to sell and that sort of thing. So we did it all pretty quickly, but yeah.
How was the journey now, the day of traveling?
Oh, it was long. So I had never really been out of the United
Your
States
country.
before. And even in the United States, I hadn't been very many places. And so he had told me it's a long flight, it's a lot. I was really worried about how the kids were going to do because we're traveling with 7 kids, one of them being a 2-year-old, one being a 3-year-old. So I knew we were going to have some challenges, but they did really well, and we didn't have any issues. All our luggage made it. We didn't miss any flights. And so it was really, really pretty easy. Now, the hardest part is a lot of times when you land in Kenya, you land at like midnight. So we had traveled all that way, and then we get here late at night. Then you got to go through immigration and go through customs. So you spend like another hour in the airport. And then we just stayed in a hotel in Nairobi that night, and before we drove to Bungoma the next day.
How was the experience in the hotel in Nairobi?
Oh, it was different. I don't even know what area of Nairobi we stayed in. I couldn't find it again if I had to. It was pretty close to the airport though, but it was like right next to a club, and so like the music is thumping. It's like, we're trying to sleep, and we're all in a new place, and of course, we're tired, and of course we didn't have they didn't have connecting rooms, so now we're like all the girls are in one room and the boys are in another room, and I'm like, are we going to make it through the night? It was just loud and very different than what, and it was a very different hotel room than we had ever seen before, and so everything was totally different. So we were all looking forward to leaving and getting to the village, although the village had its own set of shocking things that I didn't expect.
I know.
Yeah.
So what was your expectation moving to Kenya?
I didn't really have any expectations because I didn't know what to expect. Jeff and I had talked about taking a trip, just him and I, so we could kind of see where we were going to live, and then I could kind of better plan. But I got nervous and thought that I was going to hate it, and so I didn't want to come and see it. I just wanted to move at once because I didn't want to be worried and scared and all the things while we were trying to move, because I knew we were moving. It was like I knew that that's what God wanted us to do, so I had to do it, but I kind of needed to just do it and not know what to expect. So I really did not know what to expect at all.
And your fears?
I think my fears were just like something would happen to us. Maybe the pastors that were supposed to come get us wouldn't come get us, or something like that. It wasn't really like a life-threatening thing. It was just more like the unknown was the fear.
So spending the first night in Nairobi, the following morning, take us.
We got up very early and got on the matatus. We were on 2, so one was carrying all of our luggage, and then our family was on another one with some more of luggage. We got a lot of luggage, but it was exciting for me, and I think for the kids. I don't know how Stephanie was feeling, but I was just really excited, and it's a beautiful drive. You're passing by the national park, and you're seeing baboons on the road and things like that. So that's interesting to us coming from Texas, not really seeing those kinds of sights. So it was really exciting. Yeah,
it was beautiful too. I think I didn't expect it to be beautiful. You think of like Africa, and you think it's all dry. It's not.
Okay.
You're seeing like big green trees, and it's beautiful. So I didn't expect that. I was like, okay, I kind of like traveling a little bit now.
And the kids?
Oh, the kids loved it. They were so excited to be in a new place and to have a new adventure. The kids were very excited.
Yeah.
Wow. Now arriving in Bungoma, where did you go to live?
So we went to stay with one of the pastors that we came to work with, and so we got to. He lives in another village near here, and.
He is an American too?
No.
Oh, he's a Kenyan?
No, he's a Kenyan. A Kenyan pastor.
Okay.
We were staying with a Kenyan family while we looked for land to buy and then build the children's home. So So we got to his village. They stopped the van. They had us all get out, and there was a great crowd there ready
Waiting
to
for you.
greet us. We were not expecting that, and they had like a parade where we walked down the road to the house with about, I don't know, maybe 75, 100 people.
I don't know.
There was a lot of people.
So you arrived at what time?
It was in the evening. It was still light.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
still light.
around maybe 5 p.m.
Yeah.
I think it would have been about 5 p.m. So they had a tent set up and had everybody come under the tent, and we had like a little mini worship service there, and greeted us, and we...
There was food.
Yeah.
yeah, there was food.
Yeah.
Now it's the first time
There was food.
taking
Yeah.
Kenyan food.
That's
Stephanie,
Yeah. Yeah.
what's about that?
That was it's pretty interesting. So like in America, when you eat meat, it's almost always tender. It's not it's not chewy or tough. So that was something that we had to get used to. We don't have ugali in America, and so that was something new. But you know, we eat beans and rice and stuff like that. So all of that was pretty normal. But yeah, the ugali is still something. I mean, I eat it every now and then, but it's not something that I just love.
So they had cooked for you meat and ugari.
Yeah.
that day.
Yeah.
And the kids' reaction to the food.
Our kids are pretty adventurous. They'll try just about anything. Some of our kids like ugali, some of them don't. But some of, like Reed was 2 when we moved here. He loves ugali. He'd eat it every single meal if we let him. Like,
And the people, how they interacted with you, that first impression.
yeah, I mean, I think everybody was kind of in shock. You know, like we were in shock because we just came to a new culture, but I think they were also in shock that
Yeah,
new people came there, you know? So we were all kind of like, didn't really know what to say or do. Yeah.
I think many of them had never interacted with a white person before.
Yeah.
So were they talking to you because you people speak English and here in village it's mother tongue? Like relationship.
The pastor that we were working with when we moved here knew pretty good English, and so he did a lot of translating for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So arriving in the village that evening, you started living in his home.
You're right.
How long?
We were there, how long did we live
4.5 months.
Half a month.
there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had sent him some money ahead of time to build an extra room, and he went ahead and plastered his house and built some toilets back behind and had a wall around it. So we had helped him, make some improvements to his house before we moved the whole family there. Otherwise, it would have been difficult to bring 9 people
Yeah. Yeah.
into a
Someone
typical
who-
village house. That would have been very stressful for him. And so, yeah, we moved in there for 4.5 months, and I don't know, for me it went by, I think, fairly quickly because we stayed busy digging a well first. We dug a well at the school, and we began looking for land near the school where we could begin building. We thought we already had land procured, but the owner of that land backed out once we got here, so then we had to find another property where we could build. And then we did that, and we began constructing Mercy Home. That was the first building that we built here on the property, and it was May, I think.
April, when we moved in.
Oh, April, end of April
2017.
2017 that we moved into Mercy Home, even though it was not yet finished. But it was finished enough that we could start living there.
And that was the experience living with the host who
Yeah.
was hosting you.
Maybe Stephanie can share.
Imagine.
It was interesting. He had a typical home, and so the roof is very close, so I think it's even hotter. Like our home, the roof is further away, and so it's not as hot, I think. But that was one thing I remember, thinking it is so hot. And like Jeff said, it went by fast, but he was gone a lot here supervising, and me and the kids were there. And so it didn't go by so fast for us. You know, again, we were somewhere we don't know. We can't just go wherever we want to go. There was no, like, town is, you know, 30 minutes away. So it's a big chore to go to town. So that time went really slow for us.
Yeah, I think it's you know, I think it would be hard for anyone living in someone else's home.
Yes.
You know, you don't feel at home there. It's just not your home. And so that part was difficult.
And I think too, there's this misconception that because you're from America, that you don't know how to do anything. Like maybe the ladies that were there thought that we had housekeepers in America, but in America, I ran my home. I didn't have anybody helping me clean except for my kids. We did it together. And so, like, I would try and, like, sweep something, and they would come and take the broom from me. I'm like, I can sweep. It's okay. I still have that challenge here sometimes. I'm like, I can do it. I know how. I can cook. I can clean. I cannot roll chapati, but I can do some things. And so that was a struggle for me, just feeling like I was always like a guest, even though we were living there. And we knew that this was like, Kenya was home for us now. It was like they weren't there yet.
Jeff, how did the community receive you as an American family here in the village?
In general, they were friendly, but there was a definite struggle because the pastor that we initially came to work with was, as we later found out, intentionally keeping the community away from us. He wanted to keep us isolated, not speaking personally with the community ourselves. He
When
wanted.
did you think that happened?
He wanted everything passing through him because he wanted to be in control. He wanted to be in control of any of the money that our ministry was bringing in. He wanted to be in control of how that money would be used. He did not want any of the community sharing truths that they knew about him with us. And but those things we did not figure out until later. So at the time, it just felt like, well, you know, no one wants to come and talk to us just because they're scared or because of the language barrier. You know, we were assuming that was what was going on. But in reality, it was this one main person controlling everything.
Yes.
Well, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And the biggest challenge living here in Kenya?
Oh, the biggest challenge? For me, it's the burden to meet needs that we might not necessarily have the funds to meet. Village life is different than town life, but you know, Bungoma and Nairobi are so very different anyways. But then when you leave Bungoma town and you go out into the village, it's even more different. And so, you know, seeing children suffer is probably the hardest thing. And I want to fix it, and I want to fix it all. But sometimes you can't. And sometimes there's not really a good answer. There's a family that we help. Just for example, the mom has some mental challenges and the dad is a drunk. And you want to step in and fix it for those kids, so they come to our school and we give them a food box each month, but there's not really a lot more we can do because the dad's not doing his part. And the mom faithfully comes to church and tries to do things where she can, but it's just difficult. And I know there's kids there that are suffering, but I can't just fix it. So we've had a lot of challenges, but most of them were in the beginning. So we lived with that pastor for about 4.5 months, and we kind of noticed things then. We would ask questions. We're trying to get to know the culture, the people. We're trying to understand things. And he would tell us, oh, you ask many questions like the police. I was like, oh, we're just trying, like, we're viewing this as this is our home. We need to get to understand our home. And so as we were, you know, getting ready to open the children's home, we would say, well, what about a children's department? Do we need to go and like register? Oh, no, we don't do that here. I was like, okay. And so everything we asked, it was like he was just kind of blowing us off, and we kind of felt like that, but we didn't have anybody else to ask. We didn't know anybody but him and his pastors. And so once we moved in here, we started taking in kids, and they were attending the school that was just across the street that our ministry was also supporting. And the closer we got with the school, the more we realized there were a lot of things going on there that weren't okay. So, for example, in Kenya, it's typical for the teachers to be harsh with the students, even hit them at times. But in America, that is not the case. That does not happen. And so when you have a school that's being funded by Americans, you have to run it in a certain way, or they're not going to give you money to run it. And so we started having those discussions, like the teachers can't hit the kids with sticks during class. And they said, oh no, this is Kenya, this is how we do. And we're like, okay, but you're funded by Americans, and if Americans see that, they're not going to like it. I mean, it's not, they're going to consider that child abuse, and you just can't do it. And so they continued, even though we were telling them not to. Then we started taking in street boys from Bungoma town, and they did not like the street boys. They didn't want the street boys mixed in with their village kids, but that's what we were doing. Like this is part of why we came here. And so we're sending them to the school across the street. Well, they're being mean to them. They're telling them they're going to take them back to town. They're going to get rid of them, that we're going to leave, all this stuff. And so one day they came home for lunch, and they were telling Jeff that they were being hit at school again. And so Jeff said, okay, we're done. And he went to the school and collected their backpacks. And we were like, I don't know, didn't know what we were going to do, didn't know where we were going to send them to school, but we knew that wasn't going to work for us anymore. So they also knew that when we pulled our kids out of school, that meant something as far as funding for them. So they came over, it was like 10 of them, came over, and they wanted to talk to Jeff. And I said, don't let them in the house. I said, just go out, go to the school and talk to them over there. So they left the compound, and they were walking over to the school, and all of a sudden I had this really bad feeling, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't have sent them outside. Maybe this isn't good. And so I told Carson, who he's 20 now, but he was 14 at the time, I said, go check on your dad and make sure everything's okay. So he went to the gate, he looked out of the gate, and he sees Jeff on the ground. And so these pastors had attacked him and taken him to the ground. And so Carson runs in and grabs a machete, because all he sees is his dad on the ground, and he knows he's got to help dad. So he grabs a machete, he runs out of the gate. Well, by that time Jeff's up, and Jeff's headed back to the gate, and Carson comes out with like this machete held high, and it scares Jeff. Jeff's like, what are you doing? He's like yelling at Carson, and then all the pastors like back up, and then they're like, what are you doing? And so it gave us enough time to get Jeff and Carson back in the gate, get the gate locked. And so during all of that, we had a groundskeeper that went outside to see what was going on. Well, we had a typical metal gate that has like the smaller door cut out. Well, he ran out the gate. When he did, he hit his head on the top bar. And so it cut his head. So that pastor started telling everybody that Carson had cut him with the panga. And so now we have a crowd forming, because, you know, any noise in the village, everybody's going to come out and see what's going on. And so now there's probably 20 or 30 people outside our house. They're trying to kick the gate down. They're throwing bricks on the roof. And then Jeff's telling me, call the police. I'm like, I don't know how to call the police. Like, I don't.
Yeah, we don't like.
Yeah.
You visit their place.
Yeah. So in America, you just dial 911 and you tell them what you need, and they send somebody very quickly if it's an emergency. And I'm like, I don't know how to call the police. And so we had a couple of drivers that drove for us on a regular basis. And so I called them, and I was like, I need you to bring the police. And their English wasn't good. They did not understand my English, because my English is even more different. And so I'm like, police, bring the police. So they did, which I wasn't even sure if they would, because the only way we knew them was through this pastor. Everybody we knew was connected to the pastor. And so they brought the police, and the police took Jeff and Carson to the police station with some of the other people and got it all sorted out. And they were like, there's no way that cut is from a panga. And they're like, something else happened. That guy ended up admitting that, he was lying and that they told him to lie and all that kind of stuff. So that night we moved out of our home.
To where?
We went to Kandui. We got a rental house in Kandui. And so at that time we had about 15 kids from the village in Bungoma, and then we had ours. Yeah. After that, because they were throwing bricks and they were threatening us because all the lies they had been told. And so we moved, and we tried to just kind of cut off the relationship and just be done. But they had been stealing money for years. So they were getting money to run the school, but they were buying land and they were buying motorbikes. And so they started selling all that stuff and going to government officials. And so we had the children's officer coming after us. We had immigration coming after us. It was like constant, something was going on. So we ended up going to court, and we ended up going to jail. The magistrate very quickly made very quick decisions, and put us in jail for 2 weeks is what the initial,
And the kids were?
The kids were here. No, the kids were in, we had moved back here at that point.
By that point, we had
moved back.
So they're living alone here?
Yeah. So we had a really good attorney. We have a really good attorney. And he got me out the same day, and Jeff only spent 4 days. So it could have been worse. And then after that, it was like once we went to jail, we learned a whole lot. We got to know the children's officer. We got to, all these things kind of opened up for us. And it was actually really, really good because we were asking all the right questions, but we were asking them to the wrong people. They were never going to give us true answers. And so everything was kind of like our immigration. We didn't know. We were supposed to be working on getting a work visa. They told us they were taking care of that. Well, they weren't. They didn't know how. So it really sent us on this journey of getting everything right. So now we have a really good relationship with our children's officer, and now we have the right visas, and we learned a lot. The village ended up coming to town in Kandui where we were staying and asked us to have a meeting with a lot of the village elders. And then they asked us to come back. They said they realized they had been lied to. We shared with them financial information as far as like how much they were getting for the school and stuff like that. So a lot more lies were exposed, and it was good because they asked us to come back. So once they asked us to come back, we felt better about it. We were actually trying to just start completely over somewhere different because we felt like they didn't want us here. But they didn't want us here based on lies.
Yeah.
That Kenyan jail and the judiciary system.
Yeah, so I was only in a few hours, and I was just at Bungoma police station. But it was very, I don't know what I expected. I guess I expected beds and stuff. There was not beds. There was just some little thin mats on the floor. And when I got in there, all the ladies were like, "Do you have money?" And I was like, "No." And I didn't realize I could keep my phone. So I gave my phone to my driver, and I was like, "Take it to my kids. They know how to use M-Pesa. They'll get you money if you need money." And so I didn't have my phone. All I had was my passport. And I think there was only one lady that could speak English. So she was translating for everybody. And they were nice, but I was only in there a few hours, and I was glad because I didn't know where I was going to sleep.
They took me to Bungoma Men's Prison. And of course, when I arrived, now everyone's very surprised to see a Muzungu there in the prison. And, people would come and talk to me. I met murderers. I met a man who had defiled 2 young girls and was there serving 30 years. I met, men who had been accused of being thieves and were on remand for over a year already. So I just met different kinds of people in there. We were just talking. When it came time to eat, I was a bit embarrassed because, I'm just getting in the long line to go through and get something to eat, and they took me to the front of the line and let me pass everyone, I guess, just because I'm Muzungu. And
or maybe you're different, the one
yeah, maybe, or they still view me as a visitor. I'm just there visiting, so they want to treat me kindly. So that was fine, and the guards there were not harsh with me. They were actually quite friendly, and I think one of the main guards in charge took me into his office and was talking to me a bit, and so it really wasn't bad. And then we went on lockdown before it got dark. I think maybe around 6 p.m. they just lock us in the cells. So I was just in a cell with a few men and ready to lay down and go to sleep. And then I think about an hour and a half later they came and got me out. My advocate had gotten permission to move me from the prison to the police station in town. And there it was not so bad. In fact, they didn't even put me in the main cell. They put me in the juvenile cell. So I was just in there with 2 boys. And they would even release me during the day because I knew one of the officers who was in the crime division. And so they would just let me sit in the crime office, and Stephanie was allowed to come and visit me. Yeah,
it's a soft life.
Bring me chips cuckoo. I mean, it really wasn't.
He's in there laughing with the officers.
Yeah, I was in prison, and you think it's like a big deal, but actually it was not so bad. After, I think I was there 4 days, and then our advocate got the case moved to the high court judge, and she was able to see what was really happening. She even put in her ruling that the children's officer had been compromised and ruled that she had to pay a fine or spend 30 days in jail. And the kids were returned to us by court order. So during all of that, the children who had came to live in the children's home, of course, had been removed. And the high court judge ruled that they be returned to us. And now we had that court order saying the children were to live with us. And so really, I just see that God used that whole experience in a way to bless us and to help us. We were educated through that. Before, that pastor we were working with was keeping everyone away from us, keeping us from learning the real way to do things, how it's supposed to be done. And so during all of that, we learned about immigration, what we needed to stay here legally and to work, the proper work permit for a missionary. We obtained those. We learned about the children's officers, and even at the time they started a children's officer here in Bumula, the sub-county that we're in. And so now that's the children's officer that we are under. And we have a very good relationship with him. And God really used that just to educate us and to help us. What
was going through your mind in that process of being, in jail?
I was really just trusting in the sovereignty of God. I knew it was all according to God's plan, that He was going to work it out. I even praised the Lord for it. And, just spent that time, I didn't have a Bible with me, but just thinking through some of the scriptures that I had memorized and singing some of the hymns that I've memorized. And it really wasn't... It wasn't a bad experience at all. I knew God was in control. I knew it would work out fine. And it did.
And Stephanie, did you ever felt like, hey, I brought chaos here?
No, I think when we first got the ruling, I didn't really realize he had ordered us for 2 weeks. I probably would have panicked more about 2 weeks. Because our kids, our biological kids were here. So that was a problem. But no, I think it was just like, I was shocked at first, but then I was like, okay, we have an advocate, we have an attorney, he's going to get this worked out. And so, Yeah, it was really just like a few hours for me before I was out, and it was an interesting experience. There were some ladies that were in jail that had babies with them, which I had never, in America that doesn't happen, but so that was interesting. And yeah, I mean, I think it was a good experience as far as it opened our eyes to so many things, and we got to know so many things through all of that we really wanted and needed to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to the missionaries who want to come to Kenya for the first time. Give them advice, what to expect, what to plan, where to get information, because you're more experienced.
Yeah. I mean, I would, just going off of the many mistakes that we have made, I would say, number one, find other missionaries who are here already.
First thing.
Because they are here, even before you come.
Yeah.
Start talking with them. Because you can get a lot of helpful information doing that. I've talked to so many people with similar stories to us that were just like us. They came and they didn't know. They didn't expect for there to be any kind of deception working with religious people. You know, you think you're coming to work with Christian pastors, that everything is going to be God honoring, and that is just not the case a lot of the time, most of the time. Most of the time, these are men who are not even saved. You know, talking about many of the local pastors, they do not know the Bible, they've never heard the gospel, they're not preaching the gospel, they're treating the church like a business, and so they see this as a way to earn power and money. And so they need to either connect with missionaries who are already here, or ministries that are already here run by Kenyans that are legitimate, and you know, they have to do their due diligence to find those. They're here. You know, in my time here, I've come across many very good men and women who are Kenyans and who are being used of the Lord to do great things. They are here, but they're, I think, can be harder to find.
Yeah.
If you're, you know, a foreigner and you just land here, most of the people who are going to flock towards you are those men who sit in cybers all day, messaging people through Facebook, trying to get a Mzungu that will support them, and they're not legitimate, and so they just need to be careful. They need to talk to those who have been through these things.
Yeah. What should they not do as foreigners?
As foreigners, any foreigner supporting a work in a land that is not their own, I would highly recommend that they not just connect with someone they don't know and start sending them money. That can be dangerous. In our case, the man who we thought we were coming to work with had been essentially enslaving his own people. You know, he was using the fact that he is the one who is connected with Wazungu as a way to rule over and control his own people in his own village. And it's really sad, you know, as we, over the next few years after all this happened, starting to unravel the truth of how he was doing things, what he was doing to these people. It was just really shocking and really, really sad.
And you want to help, but if you're
how to help right.
If you're not helping in the right way, you could actually be making it worse. I mean, just for example, you know, he had that school and he was being sent money to pay the teachers, but he wasn't paying them their full salary and he wasn't paying them every month. You can't do things like that. And so it's hard to know unless you have someone on the ground. And you know, like we came, we didn't know anybody. That was like, didn't know it. We were just asking for it. You know, like if we had talked to other missionaries that had lived in Kenya, they could have, you know, given us some insight about the deception and about how the pastors sometimes aren't really even pastors, but that it's a business. And those were all things that were like so shocking to us. We're like, what? Are you serious? Yeah. And it's every missionary we talk to, they have run into the same thing. It's always like that. I don't think so. I mean, I think everything that we experienced was due to them knowing that the money was leaving now.
So it's about money.
Yeah. It's about money.
It's about money.
Not skill. It's about money. What am I getting?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Did you ever feel like going back to America after all these challenges?
No, which I was kind of surprised. But I think, I think that's the Lord providing. We knew when we moved here, this is what we were supposed to do. And so just because things are hard doesn't mean you give up. I mean, throughout my life has been hard. You don't just give up. Our marriage has been hard at times. You just don't give up. And so I'm, like he said, I'm pretty determined. I'm hard-headed. It doesn't always work in my favor, but sometimes it does. And I think this is one of those times. We knew that this is what we were supposed to do. We didn't know that it would always be here. We thought we might have to move to a different area, but God made it so that we came back here.
Yeah.
And culture shock?
Oh, yeah.
Especially for you, Stephanie.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing for me, we had been talking before we moved, and he was like, we're not going to have power all the time. And when you've always had power, you don't know what that means. Like, you don't think it through that way. So I remember when we got here to the village where we were staying, I was like, hey, where's the refrigerator? And he was like, we don't have a refrigerator. I'm like, no, where is the refrigerator? And he's like, I told you we weren't going to have power. I said, no, you said we were going to have a generator. And he's like, yeah, but we're not going to have a refrigerator. And I'm like, how do you live without a refrigerator? Like, I didn't really, in that moment, I did not know how someone could live without a refrigerator. I had always had one. In the house we lived in before we moved to Kenya, we had 2 refrigerators and a freezer. Like, we had a large family. How do you live like that? And so I think those basic things, power, water, refrigerators, that are just everywhere in America, was probably the biggest shock to me. And then of course the bathroom situation, where the bathroom's outside, that was totally different because I'm scared of the dark. I don't like to go outside in the dark. So yeah, so that all of that was very challenging for me to understand and accept. Yeah.
And how did you adapt with the culture? Maybe washing clothes with your hands. How did you adapt?
Well, when we first moved in to the pastor's house, he had a couple ladies from the village coming to take care of us and to help with those things. And so it was really no different for me. I was like, oh, okay. And then they quit. And they had let the laundry get backed up before they quit. I think that was part of their plan. And so me and the girls were like, we'll show them. We'll just wash these clothes. Like, it can't be that hard. Oh, no, it's that hard. It is that hard. Hand washing your clothes is very hard. We have washing machines now.
So you're enjoying now.
Yeah. But we've always... part of what we wanted to do is come and help kids, but we also want to employ those from the community. And so before we had washing machines, we had ladies that did that. But there have been a couple of times where we've had to do laundry by hand, and it's pretty bad.
You moved here in 2017, right?
2016.
2016, as a family. Ever back to America?
Jeff and I have been back, but we've not been back with all of our kids. So part of it is that this is home, and we have so much going on here that it's kind of hard to leave it just with 1 or 2 people. You know, our assistant director is really good and could probably handle it. But we also have some kids that we've raised from babies who just would not understand. Zari is one of them. You know, she's 2. If we all just up and left, she would probably be scared to death. And then we have Zeke. He was the first baby we ever took in. He came to us at 2 months old, and he's now almost 6. And so he does everything with our family. If we go into town as a family, he goes with us. Sometimes we'll go on like a little short vacation, maybe 3 days, you know, here in Kenya, and he goes with us. So it's not really, not all of our kids really desire to go back. And so we've just not attempted a full family trip. Plus it's really expensive to take that many. Yeah.
What do you love most about Kenya?
What do you answer that? What do you love most?
And also what you dislike most?
Yeah. I love just the environment. I love the people. I feel at home here as much as one can feel at home in the world. What I hate most is, I don't know, hate is kind of a strong word, but what I dislike most, what I don't agree with is really deception. I think for a lot of people in Kenya, it is acceptable to them to lie as long as there's a good purpose behind that lie according to their feelings. And that is something that really took me some getting used to and understanding, okay, these people think differently, they see lying differently than I do, and trying to deal with that. And then, you know, coming here, doing research before coming, seeing things such as around 85% of Kenyans identify as Christian. And so coming here expecting that, okay, this is a Christian nation. When I'm preaching, people are understanding what I'm talking about when I'm speaking of the Bible.
Really late.
But in reality, when I got here, especially in this area of Western Kenya, starting to ask people about how Jesus saved them, tell me about the gospel, they knew nothing of the Word of God. They really, to a lot of people, Christianity is just a label. You know, my parents were Christian, so I am Christian. Or I went to a Christian high school or Catholic high school, so therefore I am Christian. But the reality is, many people here who call themselves Christian are not Christian. They've not been born again. They don't know anything about the Lord Jesus. They don't know anything about the Word of God. And so that has been eye-opening for me. You know, as a pastor, I want to know how to communicate the Word of God in a way that people can understand. And I made a lot of mistakes early on, thinking that when I use biblical words like justification and sanctification and things like that, that people knew what I was talking about. Even the gospel, when I would say the gospel of Jesus, I thought everyone knew what that meant, but come to find out, no. No, they think the gospel or the Word of God means that they're going to get rich and they're going to be healthy and
They're going to buy cars.
yeah, that the gospel is all about their own happiness.
Yeah.
And so that took a lot of getting used to and learning how to.
How is it now? How are you adapting with it?
Now I mean, I feel like I'm adapting. You know, after 6.5 years now, I feel like I still have a lot to learn. I'm thankful that God has put several men in my life who are Kenyan and who are born again and who allow me to ask those kinds of questions. You know, hey, when I preach this, or when I'm trying to help the congregation understand this, how would you put it as a Kenyan? And so, God has been very gracious in that way. I've partnered now with several other churches in Western where we can now gather together, the pastors of those churches, and discuss the issues that we're having. How should we pastor a church here in this area? So that has been very helpful. So I'm adapting. It's nothing that makes me angry or bitter or anything like that. It's just a process. And it's not a situation where I think, the American culture is so much better than the Kenyan culture. It's different. So I need to know how my culture growing up in America affects the way that I think about things and see things, and then understand how a Kenyan growing up in the Kenyan culture that affects the way they see things and understand things. So it's just a matter of education, understanding, learning, and that's something that I'll be doing the rest of my life, I think.
Yeah.
What community think about you?
It's difficult to say because, a lot of people, of course, to our face, they don't want to be rude, so they'll treat us very kind. But I know there are still rumors. There are still rumors that go around, especially much that was initially generated by the man we came to work with at first, and we had to part ways, and now he went around the community saying lies about us. And of course, people know him, they don't know us, so they believe what he says is the truth. And so that caused a lot of challenges, especially early on. But I think at this point, because we've been here close to 7 years now, and the people see that, the project continues to grow, we continue to, by God's grace, help more and more people, especially children and widows and the really needy of the community. I think, at least the best I can tell, the community is much more accepting of us now.
Yeah.
And view us more favorably than they did at first. Yeah. Okay. I'm sure there are still those there that don't like us, and that's fine. But I think the majority of the community is accepting of us. They're appreciative of what we're doing. Yeah.
And we try to stay in. We have our compound here, but we still try to stay in touch. That's one reason, like on Sunday, we feed people after church. That way we can kind of gauge how everybody's doing. We stay in contact with our staff to make sure that we understand what's going on out there, because things are different inside of our house. We do, there are things that needs or whatever in the community that we don't necessarily have. And so we talk to our staff about those to kind of see where everybody's at.
Yeah.
And do you have any plans to ever move back to America?
No plans like that. God willing, we will stay here the rest of our lives. Saseni naitwa Jeff Bees, mke yangu anaitwa Stephanie, and we're here on Miss Reche's channel, telling our story, pouring our guts out to you, and we hope you enjoy it and maybe even get something from it.
Yes.
Mambo. If you want to know more about our story or find more information about us, you can go to mercyministries.ngo.
We also have a YouTube channel called The Unlikeliest Missionaries, and really just sharing what God is doing in our little ministry here in Western Kenya. And we can also be found on Instagram at Mercy Home and Stephanie Bees or Jeff Bees. We can also be found on Facebook under those same names, and Twitter as well. I'm on Twitter, and we have a ministry Twitter, Mercy Ministries.
That's a lot of...
I know.